Why run for re-election?
I think I've been fortunate to have served the community here in Grand Rapids, both as a school board member and as a city commissioner. I love this town. I really want to make sure that we see continued success in Grand Rapids, provide opportunities for people, create opportunities for people that want to call home in Grand Rapids, want to start a business here, to have the ability to do that. And so I think I bring a valuable perspective as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, and as someone who's been committed to Grand Rapids for the last 20 years, to have an important voice at the table.
What's your priorities if reelected?
Top priorities if I get reelected are, fiscal responsibility, I think, is number one. We've at the end of the longest uninterrupted I'll start that over. We're at the longest uninterrupted stretch of economic prosperity in our country's history, and at some point that's going to slow down and probably come to a halt. So I'm proud that we've fully funded our general reserve fund and our budget stabilization fund for the first time in our history, and so just to continue to make sure that we do fiscally responsible things so that in the event of an economic downturn we can weather that storm appropriately. I'd like to continue to look at ways we can update and modify our land use to allow for creation of new housing units in Grand Rapids. We certainly have a lot of people that want to live here. We have a shortage of housing, I think, at almost every price point, and so we need to find ways to allow more housing units to be created. And I think just a continued improvement in our streets and our parks and our public services. Continue to make sure that the snowplows show up when it snows, and that we got great clean drinking water, and that we take care of the assets that we have so people get quality services in their life.
Well, you've been up there, so you know some of the other things that you've had to deal with over the last couple of years. One of them, police community relations. Any thoughts on how to move that whole issue forward?
Absolutely. I think our men and women in the police department have stepped up to the plate at every opportunity to hold themselves accountable to looking at their policies, at their procedures, at the way they do their business. But I think ultimately for me, if you want to change the way you do business, sometimes you have to make continued investments. And so I'd really like to see a further emphasis on investing in more community police officers for our community. If you talk to just about any one of our neighborhood leaders in Grand Rapids, neighborhood associations, they value and respect and cherish the relationship they have with their community police officers. So I'd really like to see 24/7, 365 coverage in every neighborhood in Grand Rapids with a community policing specialist, someone who is that liaison between the department and the community, who can be responsive to calls, who can be the person that you can turn to, not in an emergency, but to build those relationships, to create the foundational relationships that are important to improving relations in Grand Rapids.
Of course, the debate has been, do you need to hire more officers to make that happen, or do you use the ones you have to make that happen?
I think about it like you make any business decision. In order to change outcomes, sometimes you have to invest short term in solutions which aren't ultimately sustainable long term. So I think in the short term we do need some additional resources on the street to help, so that we can continue to evaluate the way in which we conduct policing in Grand Rapids. And if we're going to change the model, we can do that after we figure out the right way to change the model. But in the short term, if we're going to, every day there's still traffic accidents occur. There's still, we've had a number of murders and violent crimes in Grand Rapids. We still need to take care of our core business, and so we need to do that with the resources we have now, and then make an investment in changing the model in the future, if that's what we determine.
Another issue that does not, the City Commission didn't bring this up, but there's a grassroots effort, and that's expansion of the City Commission. Mm-hmm. How do you view that whole idea?
I think it's interesting. There's a number of proposals about the issues around elections in Grand Rapids, and where there's a lot of conversations going on. At this point, I'm really trying to figure out what problem we're trying to solve here. I think I'm proud to serve on what is probably the most diverse city commission that's ever been elected in Grand Rapids, and so our elections are free, they're fair, and they're open to anyone, and people can exercise their right to vote if they choose to, and the door's open. And so I think if we're going to look at the way in which the wards are structured, if we're going to look at when elections occur, it really needs to be a deeper dive into a look at the charter and how the charter works. I think there's a potential that there's a lot of these small issues that are all being considered as charter revisions, when maybe this needs to be a look at something deeper than that, rather than trying to part and parcel this off in small fashion.
You mentioned housing. Mm-hmm. Lack of housing stock, and affordable housing obviously has been a big issue that the commission's had to deal with. where do you go from here? There's been a lot of movement in the city commission to try to create more affordable housing, at least the incentives for it. What more can be done? Where do you see this issue?
You know, I mean, at this point, it comes down to basic laws of supply and demand, that there are more people that want to live in Grand Rapids than housing available. I continue to say that, you know, additional supply of housing doesn't solve the problem necessarily. There might be some other things that need to be done, but the problem doesn't get solved unless we increase the supply of housing in Grand Rapids. And so that means we need to increase density, that we need to look for ways to build additional capacity in the system, and then layer on other affordable housing opportunities to help people along the way that need those help. Other challenges include, you know, looking to our partners at the state to help modify some of the rules around ways in which affordable housing dollars can be spent for low-income housing tax credits. They're pretty particular about where those investments, how big they have to be, how many units they are, where they can qualify. And so Grand Rapids has done a really great job of bringing those resources into our community. But I think we need some more flexibility around how those projects score, so that we can do smaller projects. We can do some infill projects in our core neighborhoods, and you know, continue to look at land use changes that will let you know, mid-sized projects happen rather than just these very large projects that you know, are significant but are kind of boom and bust in their fashion in which they get built.
Well, this is the part of the interview where you get to look at the camera and talk about things that we may not have talked about, something that you want the voters to know about you and your policies before Election Day.
You know, I'm proud to be a small business owner, a job creator, and a champion of neighborhoods in Grand Rapids. You know, I think I bring an important perspective to the dais. I really respect and value the diversity of thought and opinion at the commission, but I think that my perspective as someone who understands what it's like to go through the process of getting a building permit or starting a business, or you know, today we talked about you know, investing in some dollars with our friends at the Chamber of Commerce and the DDA on recruiting businesses to Grand Rapids, and I think, you know, my perspective is important to that. If we're going to continue to be a strong economy, we need to continue to grow jobs and job opportunities in Grand Rapids, so that we can have that tax base that will support the things that we all want and desire.